Agora sim, estamos ao vivo.
Okay.
A partir de agora, pode dar o início, tá?
Okay. So, good morning to all of our present. So, good morning from Brazil. So, you are very happy today because we will start our first debate session of the 6 BRICS conference of the University of São Paulo. Today, we will be on cooperation, defense, and security. The countries that make up the BRICS are important force on the global scenario, and they position influence international arrangement. Peace is a difficult and a paved path. International and external conflicts are a challenge for all of our society. Today, we will hear to expertise of 4 experts on this topic. So here in this section, you have Betina, Thomaz, Ana Karolina Morais da Silva, Mr. Donnovan Williams, and Mr. Manoj Kumar Singh. So first I will introduce Mr. Betina. She has a master's degree on international strategy studies from the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul. We call it URGS, right? She's also a specialist in strategy and contemporary international relations from the same university, and a bachelor in international relations from the Escola Superior de Propaganda e Marketing. She's a former researcher of the BRICS Studies Centers, and today she's a researcher of Asia Studies at the Central America Institute of Policy and Strategy, and a coordinator of the project workshop of studies on China and East Asia. Her main research areas are India foreign policy and Asian international relations. This is the first of our guests. And the second, Ana Karolina Morais da Silva, right? She's a PhD candidate at the Institute of International Relations at the University of São Paulo. She has a master in contemporary Latin American integration and bachelor in international relations and integration by the Federal University of Latin America Integration. Research at the Center for Strategy Studies, Geopolitics and Regional Integration. Developing research in the area of international security, geopolitics, and regional integration. Right, and then our third guest is Mr. Donnovan Williams, right? She has 30 years of hand-on expertise in international, national, and local matters, both within government and non-government sectors, in the arena of the peace and security. He has worked within the continental think tank Safer Africa, which advises the African Union Peace and Security Commission, as well as the new Partnership for Africa's Development. He has expertise resource and member of African National Congress, National Executive International Relations Subcommittee. He has published in various national newspapers matter relational to international relations. And the last one is Mr. Manoj Singh. He's a honorary director of the research at the Forum for Global Studies in New Delhi. He was commissioned in the elite Bihar regime of the India Army, where he had an illustrious career for 33 years. He did the prestigious psychology operation course with the United States Army at Fort Bragg, and later served as information operation expert in India Arms headquarters in New Delhi, as well defense expert. So Mr. Tai as well also has expertise in media studies, military history, and security. He possesses vast experience in counter-insurgency and counter-terrorism operation in Jammu and Kashmir. So you are welcome, all of you guys. You are very happy today's day with you. And now we will start with Betina, okay? Betina, now is your time. Thank you so much.
Good morning. I would like to thank the event organization for the invitation to the table. and greet my panel colleagues as well as the audience that is here with us today. We are going to discuss the BRICS defense and security cooperation now. It is a topic in the group that is gaining relevance in the last few years. The BRICS security agenda has advanced slowly since the group creation. The BRICS countries aren't a formal or informal alliance. They don't have cooperative military arrangements like NATO, and are not always ideologically aligned. The engagement in arms trade, military technology transfers, and regular joint exercises occurs in different levels among the BRICS countries. During the BRICS 5 first years, most concerns facing the members states were related to countering the effects of the 2008 financial crisis. Over time, with successive summits as well as regular ministerial and sub-ministerial meetings, the BRICS came to reflect a far broader agenda, including not only concrete initiatives, but also common positions on key global issues and debates, especially those related to the reform of global governance. The international security agenda setting has proceeded far more cautiously and has almost exclusively been limited to state channels. During its first years, the security content was limited to rather abstract joint positions on major conflicts, such as of Libya, or identifying broad principles that the member states agreed upon, such as non-interference. They also straightened links between the emerging concept of security and development. In that regard, energy security and food security appeared linked to climate change and sustainable development. So we can say that security was on the sidelines on the main items of the coalition agenda, that is economic cooperation. But since 2015, the BRICS expanded its security themes and have moved towards their first concrete joint initiatives, specifically on cybersecurity and on terrorism. Even though these remain exploratory and highly topic specific, the group deepened rather than restrained its security cooperation, adopting in 2020 a counter-terrorism strategy. And the armed conflicts also became a more visible part of BRICS security discussions from this date on. These advances can be noted and must be understood considering the BRICS coalition being a relatively recent creation, composed of countries that still are getting to know one another. So in terms of institutionalization, security has become a more common topic of discussions at BRICS meetings, even though these discussions have mostly entailed efforts to coordinate general positions on specific conflicts and issues, with few incipient discussions on how to coordinate policies or implement joint actions. This is a very recent development. So the BRICS, there are declarations on BRICS dedicated to security issues, and also an increasing frequency of security-related meetings it means that the group somehow aspires to develop a denser security agenda. In addition, despite the heterogeneity, the 5 member states, they share some interests in this area. So, although the security dimension has been slow to develop, recent trends demonstrate that BRICS is shifting towards a more active security agenda. All BRICS countries want more autonomy with respect to international security, both within and beyond their regions, and to be recognized as contributors to global stability. Even as they press for more global governance and representation, these countries are somehow demanding to become bigger players within the established security governance system. The BRICS countries aspire to become more direct participants in norm setting, in the economic perspective, but also in international security. Although they have engaged in different ways to differ extents of global normative debates. These are some points that show that BRICS have some general goals in common in international security, which may facilitate the development of topic-specific joint positions and also initiatives. But the comparatively fragmented nature of this coordination can be understood by the constraints on intra-BRICS collaboration in security, including the lack of shared spatial interests, asymmetries in influence and status. We have some group members that are part of the Security Council and the other ones that are interested in being part of the Council. And also in different, in differing geopolitical concerns. These differences make it harder for the BRICS to form a comprehensive agenda, but they don't pose obstacles to cooperation in some areas and on central issues. The security concerns that have appeared in BRICS agenda have are more related to the development problems such as food security, energy security, and also the lack of well-defined spatial logic. We're talking here about the geography. Makes that the issue of cybersecurity and other outer space security are also part of a BRICS agenda in security. I believe that the BRICS initiative could become some sort of testing ground in the field of security for developing multilateral approaches to new challenges and threats of the 21st century. Because let's not forget that the main objective of the group is to promote peace, security, and development. So I will finish my talk now with the China's President Xi Jinping quote of the last BRICS foreign minister meeting on May, where he calls on BRICS countries to work together to build a global community of security for all. He says, BRICS countries need to strengthen political mutual trust and security cooperation, maintain close communication and coordination on major international and regional issues, accommodate each other's core interests and major concerns, respect each other's sovereignty, security and development interests, oppose hegemonist and power politics, reject Cold War mentality and bloc confrontation, and work together to build a global community of security for all. So just to show that security is a theme that is being debated on BRICS, and in the last years it has been more present in the discussions, and it has possibilities of development inside the group, even though this is not an alliance or such institution that deals with what will be a military arrangement.
So it's finished, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Betina. It's very interesting your topic, especially because you talk about our countries, like BRIC countries, maybe a big challenge is about the cooperation, military cooperation, and the other kind of the cooperation. But the main point about the BRICS maybe could be like the peace and the stable society, right? So thank you so much for your presentation. And now you continue. Now it's with me, Ms. Ana Karolina, right? Ms. Ana.
Hello.
Hello, the time is yours now. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to share a presentation here. So good morning, everybody. I'd like to thank GEBRICS for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. It's a very important event. And specifically, this panel is very important too, because defense and security is one of the least explored topics when we are talking about the BRICS countries. So I am very happy to be here today. And I would also like to thank everybody participating on the panel, and Betina, who came before me, because you've set at some points that are very important for our discussion. And in some points, my presentation is going to talk about some things you have talked, but I hope this helps everybody to see the big picture of BRICS cooperation in defense and security. So when I was preparing my presentation, I thought of bringing the main aspects of cooperation in defense and security in the BRICS countries, and especially focusing on the contribution that our countries may have to a global security agenda that is more inclusive and not focused on northern countries. So first, let's talk about the global context. In the past decades, we have been on a very turbulent international scenario. Yes, like increasing turbulence is what marks the international relations in the past few decades. So the undermining of US authority, the increasing competition among great powers, and this rearrangement of the global world order has set many challenges for global security. And new challenges have emerged in this past decades. And the BRICS countries could play a very important role in facing such challenges because of our general capabilities as being big regional powers in our specific regions, but also because Russia and China are some of the greatest military powers in the world. India is a nuclear power, and both Brazil and South Africa play an important role in their respective regions. So we could play a very important role in facing the challenges that have emerged in the past decades. And for now, we are still working our differences to promote a great contribution to global security, but I think that we are going through the right path. So generally speaking, the BRICS agenda in security and defense goes by some principles of what a more just international order should be. So the defense of a more representative multipolar international order is very important, is a basic principle for every action that the BRICS countries take together. So this is not different when it comes to security and defense. Our countries understand that a more representative multipolar international order would be helpful to attending to the greatest challenges we have in the security area nowadays. So we should understand that we no longer have a world ruled by one great power, but actually we have several regional powers that could take part in attending to the challenges that we have in the security arena. So our countries have took several common positions on the broad range of conflicts in the past decades, generally defending sovereignty and non-intervention principles. So a multipolar international order, sovereignty, and non-intervention are principles of the BRICS agenda in security and defense. And for this reason, our countries have defended a comprehensive reform of the UN, including its Security Council. So China and Russia are Security Council members, but India, South Africa, and Brazil intend to become members. Especially India and Brazil have pleaded in the past decades for a place in the council. So this comprehensive reform is one of the main topics in the bloc security agenda. And although Russia and China don't openly talk about Brazil and India becoming a part of the council, they are constantly defending that the council should go through a reform as well as the whole UN system. So these are the main topics of our agenda. They are very aligned with the bloc general agenda, which is promoting a more fair international order, aiming to more safety and development to all countries. So one of the greatest contributions that our countries have to global security nowadays is the participation in peacekeeping operations. And it's very interesting because although each country have their own part in UN-led peacekeeping operations, they are all united by common principles. So mostly, as I said, India and Brazil, they are in this quest for recognition of their global role, aiming for a Security Council seat in the future. Also, India regularly deploys attack helicopters to help peacekeeping operations. So there is a tactical help to peacekeeping operations. Also, China tends to contribute engineering and medical units. So China contributes with personnel to peacekeeping operations. Russia is the UN sole supplier of heavy-lift cargo planes and helicopters. So it's also a tactical help to participate to peacekeeping operations. And South Africa is a key participant in UN and African Union peacekeeping missions in Africa. Most of peacekeeping operations are happening in the African continent. So South Africa has a very important role as a regional power for these operations. So although each country has their own part in the peacekeeping operations, they are aligned through some common principles, which is very interesting because these principles in the long term could change the nature and the approach we have to peacekeeping operations in a global scale. So all of the BRICS agree that without a Security Council mandate, no peacekeeping operations may take place. So it's a very strong position in respect of the sovereignty of the countries that are receiving these operations. Also, they agree that regional organizations should play a central role in the deployment area. So this is also a way of legitimizing the operations and boosting Global South countries' agency in those operations. So regional organizations should take a part in the peacekeeping operations and not only the global powers. Also, Brazil, India, China, and South Africa tend to contribute personnel to the peacekeeping operations, whereas Russia has a more modest role because Russia has more reservations to the peacekeeping operations because Normally, Kremlin sees these operations as Western operations, but all the other 4 countries, they have a substantial contribution with personnel to peacekeeping operations. So in the long term, this growing BRICS engagement could counterbalance Western approach to peacekeeping, because sovereignty principle and empowering local and regional powers ended up leading to more caution when taking peacekeeping operations. So the greatest contributions from the BRICS is changing the approach that we have, preventing peacekeeping operations from being Western-led operations, and more comprehensive of the local and regional problems that these operations should be dealing with. So it's a very interesting contribution, although each country has their own agenda when dealing with these operations. And most of all, the greatest contribution to global security matters from the BRICS comes from a coherent agency from all countries. So we've been successfully working as a bloc when coming to international security problems in the past few decades, especially in the past decade. So the congruent voting behavior in the UN Security Council on several occasions is one of the greatest achievements of the BRICS countries. In at least 90% of the votings, we have voted together as a bloc. So this is very important, and it shows that despite of our local regional differences, because we are powers from different continents, we still find common ground when coming to global security matters. And the BRICS have acted together and in concert as a strategic group, for instance, to prevent a Western call for regime change in Syria since the beginning of the war. Also, the BRICS countries have systematically tried to undermine West's attempts to isolate Russia, especially since Crimea's annexation, and Iran because of its nuclear power program. So we have been able to show that as a bloc, we have a strategic view of what global security matters how global security matters should be handled. And we've been constantly trying to undermine Western agenda that goes against sovereignty and non-intervention principles. So this is a very important contribution of the BRICS countries to global security matters. Also, recently, during the Ukrainian war, our countries have substantially agreed on not condemning Russia's action in the war. I've separated here a quote from President Xi Jinping, a quote from June 2022, in which he says, "We must abandon Cold War mentality and bloc confrontation and oppose unilateral sanctions and the abuse of sanctions. Also, the global economic recovery remains a tortuous process while peace and security become more salient problems." So this shows concern, not only from the Chinese president, but from all the BRICS countries, that sanctions should not be used as a war mechanism, of an economic war mechanism, and also that as long as we keep treating security and peace problems with sanctions, we are not going to come up with solutions that can offer more peaceful outcomes to the conflicts that we have nowadays. So it's a part of the BRICS agenda, condemning the use of sanctions with no limits, the limitless use of sanctions. So before the Ukrainian war, China, India, and South Africa have abstained from voting on the condemnations of Russia's invasion. Brazil did vote in favor of the motion, but then declined to condemn the invasion. President Jair Bolsonaro declined on his initial position. And China and India have also significantly increased the amount of Russian oil they buy. So there is substantial support for Russia's energy industry. And now, to end my presentation, I would like to talk about a few challenges that we have for our cooperation in defense and security. So as Betina well said, the first time that our national security advisors met for the first time to discuss joint actions was in 2013, joint actions in security areas. So it's very recent. We have been discussing security and defense for less than 10 years. And in this meantime, we had a pandemics, and this also slowed the security discussions inside the bloc because we had to turn our attention to more urgent problems facing the COVID-19 pandemics. So it's very incipient. We are just beginning to discuss security and defense. And also the BRICS countries have very different security objectives, as each country is facing specific challenges in their own regional arenas and have very different sets of military capabilities. So while Russia and China are great military powers, and India is also a great military power with nuclear capability, South Africa and Brazil, they don't figure among the greatest military powers of the world, but still they are great regional military powers. So we have different specific challenges in our regions and a different set of capabilities in the military arena, but still, although these differences make it harder for us to form a comprehensive agenda, they don't pose obstacles when we are trying to cooperate in specific security areas or in some central issues, as our coherent position before global conflicts shows. We are still finding a way to coordinate our security policies. And in general, the bilateral cooperation in defense and security between Russia and China is more fruitful, as they have closest military capabilities and they are also closest geographically speaking. But these differences, they are not necessarily an obstacle, as I'm trying to defend here, and they could also provide us a greater global security contribution as we see global security from different regional perspectives. So this is my contribution for today. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Ana Karolina, for your speech. So one very important point you talk about is about the BRICS. There are a lot of difference, but difference is not like impossible to make to cooperation, right? So one of these principles of the BRICS is no intervention. No intervention is that I respect you, almost is that, right? So thanks so much for your speech. Now it's time of Mr. Donnovan Williams. He'll talk a little bit about his experience, okay? Mr. Donnovan, the time is yours. Thank you so much for.
Thank you so much. I hope all can hear me, and I hope my connection is stable.
No, you can hear you. It's okay. Okay, now you have some problems. Mr.
Within it, in terms of.
Okay.
In terms of, is the connection fine?
Now it's okay.
In terms of the
stable, but it's okay.
Okay, great stuff. Sorry about that. I'll try to be quicker, but we seem to be saying the same thing. The very first matter is that many writers seem to restrict their understanding of BRICS as a group of countries that's just is a marriage of convenience or just a vehicle for powers competing against Western hegemony. My presentation will seek to show that BRICS is a group of countries that's not a political or trading group, but rather it's a product of the historical closeness of the people of these countries. They're based on this cooperation is based on all matters, be it trade, economic, social, cultural, military, just on the sporting level. India are world cricket champions, South Africa rugby world champions, Brazil football champions, Russia has a great sporting pedigree and world champion. The sports in the summer, and when decades long closeness of the people. So it's not just about the leaders, but the people. And also that our cooperation as BRICS countries is not about dominating the world, but to create an equal, better world for all. And the current Western hegemony has resulted in human security of all persons being threatened by the military-industrial complex and its unique appetite. And therefore, as we were saying, that our BRICS countries extends beyond its leaders. It's not a marriage of convenience, no matter how much it is portrayed as one. It has been built in the relations, in the trenches of struggle. And the greatest testimony to this, in very real terms, is that political leadership has changed in BRICS countries. In India, it's changed from one party to another. In Brazil, it has changed from one party to another, but BRICS has remained intact. So it's not just a political arrangement of like political parties, that even when political parties go out of power, BRICS has remained intact. Very many other bodies would like the BRICS countries to not be as strong as they've been. But what has been shown is that in actual sense, the BRICS countries have become closer because this is a relationship built in the struggles of time. For South Africa in particular, we have cooperated with every one of these countries in our struggle for liberation, for independence and democracy. And so the closeness of our people is what gives BRICS and how they look at defense and security in everything, in fact, not just defense and security. It must be different. It mustn't be just about strength and power, but it's about having a particular viewpoint on what world we want. And that is what makes BRICS unique. It's our unity that makes us strong. And right now, though, we've seen, right, that it is a natural progression that we have to share information on technology with regard to matters of peace and security, not just security, because we think of human security, not military security. So therefore, as we look at what it is that threatens the current global security arrangements, we must ask questions about the current global military arrangements, where you have institutions like NATO, as well as the UN Security Council, where you don't just have a veto, but you have permanent members Therefore, whatever those members do, and we know they remain as members. There can be no decision they take or how they act which will change. We need to ask about what is the prospect of global peace if we have bodies like these. We have bodies that in effect ensure there's inequality. And that's what has been happening, is that the world has become more unequal. And how we navigate this becomes important. But what we have seen, just as the COVID pandemic has come to an end, that we've seen that the military-industrial complex, which requires wars, which requires a war every time to grow economies, is what is holding back actual equality. And as BRICS countries, therefore, we must offer an alternative perspective, and as a perspective that talks about human security and not economic industrial complex of the West at the base of the growing insecurity of our world. And in that regard, and that's why I'm not going to be too long, right? Our world has to be better. And BRICS countries cooperating with one another on matters so that global poverty can be tackled, that globally we are able to create a world that does not rely on power and might, but can show that you can work with each other to ensure that we have a better world. And this is not naive or idealistic, because when you think of matters in terms of human security, and not matters of how can we sell each other arms, but rather share technology that we can better the world, then we can have better peace and security. And BRICS can lead the way to show that there's a different way organization. Diego, as I said, most of the speakers were speaking the same that I was. So thank you so much. Diego?
Okay, Mr. Donnovan, thank you so much for your presentation. It's interesting your point of the view, especially when you think about what the perspective of the global peace. And the BRICS country maybe after they start to create a new perspective of peace, right? So thanks so much for your presentation. Now we will hear Mr. Donnovan Williams, okay? Mr. Donnovan, now is your time. Thank you so much.
Diego, I think I need to speak now. Mr. Donnovan has spoken.
Yes, now is your time.
Thank you, Diego. And I take this opportunity to, first of all, convey my best wishes on this auspicious occasion of a very important festival in India called Deepavali. Best wishes to all of the viewers and panelists. And thank you, Diego and your team for inviting us over. And it was such an illuminating to hear the panelists. Being the last speaker has its advantages and disadvantages. Most of my points have been already spoken about. However, I will stress on something which I may contribute with. First of all, BRICS, as can be seen, the BRICS countries come from 4 different continents, and that brings a lot of color to the alliance. And BRIC per se, as is known, it all started with Goldman Sachs paper, Building Better Global Economies, BRICS, which came out in 2001, and then it was concretized by next paper, Dreaming with BRICS, The Path to 2050, wherein Goldman Sachs had predicted that next 50 years, these countries will rule the world economically. And that's what one can see happening now. However, the issue is that despite all the good things, there are a lot of differences, as has been spoken by my previous speakers. The major ones are that many places, all the countries don't converge due to differences in values, their economies, their political structures, and geopolitical interests. We don't have adequate infrastructure to work on. There is a lack of institutionalization, and heterogeneous nature of the group also makes it a bit challenging. However, after having said all this, let me assure everybody that despite prediction by many that this kind of grouping may not survive, and every year somebody predicts of its demise, it has only grown stronger and stronger. And as brought out by our first speaker and second speaker also, in fact, BRICS has only contributed more to the world by strengthening their commitments to the United Nations, global governance, economic globalization, and free trade, and most of all, most important, the collective climate action plan. And that makes its relevance even greater. In fact, over the years, it has truly emerged as counterweight to the hegemony of unipolar world led by US, as has been brought by the previous speakers as well. It is well known that 42% of world population is, BRICS represent more than 42% of world population. In fact, China and India comprise 50% of world population. And the GDP wise, it again challenges the G7 nations, wherein we contribute 26% to the world's, we are 26% of world's GDP, whereas G7 nations are only 33%. And we are closing this gap very fast. That makes its relevance important. In fact, in this 14th summit in China, she had clearly raised global security concerns when it referred to the fiasco which happened in Afghanistan with the Americans leaving in a haste. And to that extent, see, security as a group will always find its importance, and we can always underscore the different viewpoint that the other world, other part of the European world and the Western world is doing. We give a different viewpoint. We can give, and we can give it very strongly. Another thing that I want to say that despite all the differences between, for example, India and China have broader issues and recently had skirmishes also, but that did not overtake our commitment towards the BRIC countries, because BRICS is not only Indo-China relations, and we attribute a lot of importance to other member nations, especially Brazil, Russia. Russia is a traditional friend of India, which has helped always in all crisis situations. When the world was against situation, Russians were always with us. Similarly, Brazil has always been a friend. South Africa has always been a friend. And as I said, Russia has always been with us. To that extent, we have to find convergence of our viewpoints, and more we converge, and that can only be happening with making those broader aims. Having a broader viewpoint where all of us agree. So to that extent, this has been a good work done over the past few years. Indo-China relations have never eclipsed our relations with other BRIC nations. While saying this, I also must bring about here that India has been walking a very tight rope, because it is also part of many other alliances which are quite like India is part of Quad, and it converges with other nations in Quad on issues which of interest together, and many of those may seem like they're opposing Chinese, but that's not the issue. West generally accuses BRICS of promoting a non-Western agenda or anti-EU or anti-NATO agenda, but it is not correct. It is the position propagated by only the Western media and whole of Western media. One more suggestion that has been coming up, that more nations, that is BRICS plus kind of a thing, should be happening, or BRICS outreach and more countries to join BRICS. That point is good. More people, more strength, but there it is fraught with different connotations also. For example, if new countries join in, it will bring about, it will be very difficult for convergence of all the member nations. And in fact, once other countries join in, the name itself will lose its relevance. And also, we can work out what has been mooted by Mr. Donnovan, that veto kind of system can be incorporated, wherein the founding members can have that veto thing, and other members can be joining and contributing and working together. Few more things that I want to bring about is Russia, like presently Iran and Argentina are in the process of, they have applied for BRICS, and they are in the process of joining. I don't think there's any problem in doing that, because Iran is already with Russia and India. They're part of North-South corridor, and they need some support in the world. and they find BRICS countries can give them their voice, which has been bluntly muted by American sanctions over the last many years. They're suffering, their people are suffering because of this. And they find some solace in getting back to BRICS grouping. Similarly, like when Russia was ousted out of G8 grouping in 2014, everyone thought that then it will be very difficult that Russia will be able to maintain linkages with BRICS nation. But as we have seen, we have remained intact. In fact, we have grown stronger. In the recent summit, Indian Prime Minister had proposed to hold a startup event, BRICS startup event, India being the third largest startup nation. And that may bring in new innovations and collaboration in terms of new things coming in. And moreover, India is very advanced in space technologies, remote sensing, and such technology can be shared. And many other countries have expertise in different things. And if the countries can collaborate together for the good of the people, it is always welcome. And one more thing, I can just say that presently the world is facing a very big challenge, a challenge due to the Ukraine war, the shortages of food, fuel, and fertilizers. And I call upon the BRICS countries to contribute in solving this crisis, wherein the Western countries have actually failed to resolve. Because of Ukraine conflict, the food issues which has emerged in Africa, in Middle East, Syria, Asian countries, and this crisis is not, it cannot be simply overlooked. And what else can I talk about? One more suggestion that I have, that BRICS, to make it stronger, we must have alignments with other international forums and alliances like ASEAN or Shanghai Cooperation Organization or SAARC. This may, different alliances can get together to become a very strong voice, an alternative voice to the hegemony of West. That can be one suggestion that can be thought about. That's all from my side. Most of the other points have been already covered. And if just a matter of quick Indian perspective of the thought process of Indian Prime Minister, how it has brought about changes here, very, very short 2-3 lines that I would talk about. India has been working very hard on becoming Atmanirbhar Bharat. That means becoming self-reliant India. And Indian Prime Minister has been talking about vocal for local, meaning we must promote local products. And with this, we have seen a lot of traction. And even in defense industry in the country, we have seen indigenous production has multiplied. India has been able to now commission aircraft carrier this year. They have their own fighter jets manufacturing, helicopter manufacturing. Their space program is exceptionally advanced. And I think when we collaborate, we can all grow together. Thank you so very much.
Mr. Manoj, thank you so much for your speech. I think one point is important you talk about it is our countries, the BRICS groups, is made by different continents, right? You are very different culture, reality, but we decide to stay together, right? And when you stay together, you start to see our problem is the India's problem is also our problem. The South Africa problem is also our problem. So now we start to create this group and solve some problems. So today you are very excited, very happy because we have a very good discussion about especially peace and security.
May I add just one line? India's philosophy is Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. That means it's a Sanskrit sentence. It means the world is our family. And that's the essence that we want to grow with. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So you have several questions from our audience, so it's very interesting. So you have almost more like 30 minutes from this time. So let's go to separate some questions for which one, okay? So let's go to start with Betina. Betina, the question for you is from our chat. One of the members of the audience mentioned that the former Embraer had been working with the France on helicopters, and he believed that this will forcibly soon involve the BRICS. What do you think is this initiatives that Brazil has with other countries, such as the one mentioned by the audience, can include other BRICS countries?
This kind of collaboration in defense, it can happen, but in BRICS it has been going on bilateral terms. So we have examples of defense cooperation between China and Russia and India. We have also China and Russia collaborating with different defense matters in terms of technology and arms transfer with different countries, but I don't have knowledge of a specific initiative that involves all countries as a group. Maybe some of the others finalists have some information in this particular point.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So Ana Karolina, also there's some questions for you from our audience about like how BRICS can deal with cyber espionage. Is there any initiatives in this area?
Mm-hmm. So this is a very interesting question, actually. Since 2013, when that scandal came up through Edward Snowden, and we found out that many countries had been spied upon by the United States, BRICS countries immediately started cooperating more on cybersecurity. And in the past summits, all the declarations from the BRICS leaders have expressed their intention to advance in the cooperation in this domain, including through the implementation of the BRICS roadmap of practical cooperation. And so our ICTs leaders, they have been sharing experience and trying to find a common ground for the cooperation on this matter. Nowadays, we have several frameworks among BRICS states on cybersecurity, and also our governments, they have emphasized consistently that the UN should be the venue for cybersecurity policy development. So we are not only seeking to develop a BRICS cybersecurity policy, we are constantly defending that the world should be discussing this, that this should be a part of the global security agenda, since we have been facing several cyber threats. So especially Russia and China, for as far as I know, they have more experience in this field, and I understand that the cooperation should go through sharing experiences and technologies for cybersecurity. But yes, we have been discussing this as a block for the past decade, especially since the scandal of Spanish from CIA.
Okay, thank you so much for your answer. Now, let's have a question from Mr. Donnovan, especially from South Africa, because you know, Brazilian country is almost for our international policies. It discusses about one seat so we have a question here. Maybe it's good for it's better you help us. BRICS, BRICS as a group is expression for UNSC reform. As in South Africa doing, Brazil is continuously only applied to a permanent seat. What the position of the South Africa about that?
Thank you. You know, I think that is also linked with the first question that was raised about will BRICS, as it cooperates on security and defense matters, will it cherish multilateralism or will it jeopardize it? Because the pinnacle or the apex of the global multilateral system is the United Nations. And that apex, and the apex in the apex, the pinnacle of the United Nations is the UN Security Council. And the UN Security Council reflects what the multilateral system has been all about. We have been told to cherish this multilateral system without actually openly admitting that the multilateral system itself, as much as we cherish it, is unequal. It is unequal because you can have the Kyoto Protocol, and you can have countries which have not signed the Kyoto Protocol, but dictate what that protocol must be all about. You can have the Security Council, which is based on might. Because you have the access to certain weaponry and types of bombs, therefore you will be a veto-wielding member. It is what is wrong with our multilateral system. It is what makes our multilateral system so unequal that we think of it as the solution, but it actually reaffirms and reinforces the inequalities. So for South Africa, our position on the UN Security Council is that our position is that which would always be an African position. We take it into the own multilateral body of the African Union and into the Peace and Security Council of the African Union. We recognize that there is something wrong with our multilateral security system when it relies not just on veto, but also on permanence. So therefore, it is not about South Africa just if suddenly we are part of the inequality and the privileged preferred ones, then suddenly the system becomes good. It can't be like that. It can't be like that. And that's the problem, that if we sit in here and we say all the nice things that, yes, we are together, we are united, but all I do is I argue just in the interest of South Africa. And if South Africa's interest isn't the peace and security of the world and the peace and security of its region, then how will it be good for BRICS? So as principal countries, how we discuss and debate in BRICS, and what we've got to show that this chauvinistic, muscular, multilateral system that depends on power and might is not the way to go. It reinforces inequalities, therefore it reinforces instability, and therefore it creates a situation where if one country does something incorrectly, depending on its power and might, it can be excused, as we've seen with the Edward Snowden affair and what he had exposed. As we have seen, what is an invasion and what's not an invasion, what is a human right, what's not a human right. So when we discuss these matters, we must discuss it not just as equals, but discuss it with the same objectives in mind. And in that regard now, more particularly, there must be reform of the Security Council, there must be reform of the United Nations, but it has to be done that we bring all countries into that discussion. Because what really happens with those in might is how they further divide us is as you get closer to solutions, they offer a solution for one of the countries. So South Africa wants reform of the Security Council. It would love to be a member with greater responsibilities in the Security Council, but it doesn't want to have that discussion like it's its only national interest. And therefore, as BRICS, we must discuss this so that we are not just discussing for BRICS members to be veto wielding or permanent members, but to have a better UN Security Council. Because at a stage, whilst we are in power, or whilst you feel like you are in power or you have those powers, it doesn't affect you. But the moment you need the assistance, that's when you realize how bad the inequality is. So yes, and as South Africa, we always defined our interests within the broader interest of our continent, Africa, which has been the most colonized and the poorest continents in our world. I hope that is as well. I enjoyed the inputs quite a lot.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Donnovan, one more time. So you have like some questions from Mr. Manoj, especially sobre weapons. There are questions from Cassio. So let me see exactly. Mr. Manoj, how can BRICS country cooperate in new field of conflict? For example, lethal, autonomous weapons, cyber weapons, social media, weaponization of the economy. How can BRICS countries can do with this kind of conflict?
See, my take on this is that we should cooperate on humanitarian kind of applications of various things like space or anything scientific, or for example, cybersecurity. Only for we should cooperate in terms of bringing about good out of it. Nothing for the warfare, or I'm not proposing any alliance for security per se. Where we can cooperate is, as I mentioned in my talk, that in applications, space application, remote sensing, other things, even drones, where it can actually help us in agriculture and some humanitarian applications, digital things, like for example, India can contribute immensely in terms of digitizing the countries, or helping and advising, because if you are aware, India has the cheapest data network in the world, the kind of data, because that government had intended that this data network it can be very enabling, and it should reach each person. And that's how we have everything digitized. Even whatever subsidies which are given goes directly into the accounts, and this has only happened with data enabling all the population. So my take is that as BRICS, as a grouping, because we do not have that much of congruence of in terms of security, like Russia, India and China, we have unresolved security issues, and these are very complex issues which cannot be resolved over time. And similarly, we don't have issues with other members, but we had very close relations with Russia in defense cooperation. So my take is that we can really cooperate in humanitarian ways with science, technology, and each one of us can contribute. Each country has a lot of experience and specialization. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Manavan, thank you so much. So we have more questions here. Betina, it's possible you help to us answer this question. Do you believe that establishment of groups in like BRICS would sharing or jeopardize multilateralism? Is there hope for a multilateral and multipolar update version of UN, especially in defense issues? We cannot hear.
I'm sorry. I will complement Donnovan talk about the UN Security Council. Groups like BRICS, they make the multilateralism happen in the world. It's not bad to have more than one group that's willing to work on multilateral terms. The difference here is that we have a group that is formed for countries, for emerging countries or countries from the South, let's say, that these countries are not the countries in these are not the countries of Europe or United States, right? That have been for many decades making the rules of international relations, the norms. So I believe it's a good thing to have groups as BRICS and initiatives as the New Development Bank, for example, that offer alternatives to the established institutions. In relation to the UN Security Council, I hope that the Council will have some modifications and will be more democratic and inclusive. It's kind of unfair. These few countries decide to have the veto and decide the security issues that go on the rest of the world. Because even though we have non-permanent seats and some voices are heard, these voices don't have the right to vote and decide. And different countries have different interests, and all of them should have the right to vote and to be heard. So I believe that BRICS not just make a better a contribution to multilateralism, but also a contribution to a multipolar world that the established institutions, as you like it or not, are very centered in old formats that, in a way, they promote the interests of the United States and some European countries. That's it.
Okay, thank you so much, Betina. So I have a last question for Mr. Donnovan, because I know today is a very nice festival in India, and he needs to enjoy this festival. So, Mr. Manoj, do you see possible cooperation between the BRICS countries regarding the new form of warfare, such as artificial intelligence weapons, cyber war, social media, PCs, or ops war? I promise the last question for you, Mr. Manoj.
See, the last question was also quite related. And as I said, I don't see that coming up in that manner, because all these, you see the groupings, we are so diverse and we are from so many different continents, as I said. I don't think that convergence in cooperation in security is likely to happen, especially in terms of artificial intelligence with diverse interests. China trying to be, it doesn't want multipolar world. China wants to dominate the world. It wants to challenge the US leadership. And China aspires to be the superpower, the top power, the unipolar power. And it doesn't want multilateralism. And so I don't think that, and China being China, they're not likely to share those kind of technologies with other countries. So again, I come back to my previous take that I see this cooperation only in humanitarian terms, not in security field. That is my take, sir.
Okay, so thank you so much, Mr. Manoj. So actually, you finish now because this time is almost. So I would like to thank all of you guys to enjoy our conference. So we hope probably maybe in the future, the next year, you can also come to Brazil, enjoy our conference, but everyone here. So I think it will be a very nice experience. Stay with you guys and know a little bit more about your country, your culture here in Brazil. And also we can share a little bit about Brazilian culture, and let's go to stay together as a group. The peace starts with the very small thing. So stay together, make friendship. You can start the peace like things like that. Okay. Thank you so much, all of you guys.
Thank you. We'll wait for the invitation, Diego, to Brazil. I think all of us would love to visit Brazil, definitely.
Okay.
And I must say that I have been educated today by presentations of Anna ma'am, Betina ma'am, and especially Donnovan sir. It was great hearing you out. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much. It's been
Take
a
care,
pleasure.
everybody. Yes. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Diego.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.